Takeshi sat cross-legged on the edge of a quiet rooftop in Tokyo, the neon lights of the city stretching endlessly below him. The hum of traffic, the chatter of passers-by, and the distant wail of a train created a rhythm he had grown accustomed to, yet it brought him little comfort. He was surrounded by millions of lives, but he felt as if he were floating alone, invisible and detached. Life had been a series of lessons wrapped in disappointment. Friendships had faded, opportunities had slipped through his fingers, and even family ties seemed strained by unspoken misunderstandings. Despite all this, there was a part of him that refused to give up, a small, persistent ember of curiosity and hope. He longed for a connection, something real and unguarded, yet the walls he had built around himself prevented even the simplest gestures from breaking through. Takeshi often wondered if people were capable of genuine kindness without expecting anything in return. It was a question that kept him awake at night, staring at the stars above the cityscape. One evening, as rain began to drizzle lightly over the rooftop, Takeshi noticed an old, weathered manuscript tucked away in a forgotten corner of the rooftop garden. Its pages were yellowed with age, and the ink had faded in some spots, but the title caught his eye immediately, The Forbidden Japanese Technique to Control Your Mind. The words felt almost alive, calling to him, teasing him with the promise of understanding something profound, not only about others but about himself. Takeshi hesitated. Control my mind, or someone else's, he whispered to himself. Curiosity overpowered caution, and he carefully opened the fragile pages. The manuscript described methods of focus, mental discipline, and an almost mystical understanding of human emotion. As he read, he realized the technique wasn't about domination or manipulation. It was about connection, about recognizing the currents of thought and feeling within oneself and others. The rainy city below seemed to fade as he immersed himself in the words. Takeshi felt a strange energy coursing through him, a sensation of calm clarity and heightened awareness. For the first time in years, he felt a bridge forming between himself and the world outside. The technique seemed simple, yet it demanded patience, empathy, and self-reflection. It was not power in the traditional sense. It was a power that could only be wielded by someone willing to act with kindness. As the rain turned into a steady downpour, Takeshi looked out over the glowing city and realized something profound. The journey wasn't about mastering others, it was about mastering himself, discovering the courage to reach beyond his own loneliness and touch the lives of those around him. And for the first time in a long while, a faint smile appeared on his face, as if hope had quietly returned to claim a small corner of his heart. Days passed, and Takeshi immersed himself in the teachings of the Forbidden Manuscript. The techniques were subtle, focused breathing, mindful observation, and understanding the unspoken feelings of those around him. At first, he practiced alone, experimenting on small details, noticing the hesitation in a stranger's step, the nervous flicker in someone's eyes, or the unspoken sadness in a passerby's expression. Each discovery filled him with a quiet awe, a realization that human emotion was more delicate and interconnected than he had ever imagined. One rainy afternoon, Takeshi walked through a narrow street lined with small shops. Umbrellas dotted the sidewalks like colorful mushrooms, and the scent of wet asphalt mingled with the faint aroma of freshly baked bread from a nearby bakery. People hurried past, heads down, anxious to escape the drizzle. Takeshi's mind, however, was unusually calm, alert to the currents of emotion around him. He noticed her immediately, a young woman struggling with two overflowing grocery bags, balancing precariously as the slippery pavement threatened to topple her. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, lips pressed tightly together as she navigated the street, but she was oblivious to the puddles forming around her feet. A wave of tension radiated from her, a mix of frustration, exhaustion, and anxiety. Takeshi felt it as though it were his own. Without thinking, he stepped forward, calling gently, "Allow me." The woman looked up, startled, her eyes wide and wary. Takeshi smiled reassuringly and reached for the bags. The weight surprised him. It was heavier than he expected, but he didn't hesitate. As he carried the groceries to her doorstep, he noticed something remarkable. With each small step, her tension seemed to ease, a faint smile creeping onto her face. She laughed softly, a sound that lifted the gray weight from Takeshi's chest. At that moment, he felt the forbidden technique working in a way he had never anticipated. It wasn't about controlling her mind, or bending her will to his own. It was about connecting, about empathy, about letting someone know they were not alone in the world. By offering genuine, selfless help, he had not only lightened her burden but had eased his own heart as well. "Thank you," she said softly, her eyes shining. I don't know why, but I feel like everything will be okay now." Takeshi realized she wasn't just speaking about the groceries, she was speaking about life, about hope, about the small but profound impact one human being could have on another. As the rain continued to fall, Takeshi watched her disappear into her apartment building, the bags now safely inside. He felt a strange, warming clarity, the kind that comes only from truly acting with kindness, with no expectation of reward. It was then he understood the essence of the technique. It was not a weapon or a tool for manipulation. It was a bridge, a way to awaken the innate goodness within others and, ultimately, within himself. In the weeks that followed, Takeshi began to notice subtle changes around him. The small act of helping the young woman with her groceries had awakened something within him, a curiosity to observe, to connect, and to bring small moments of kindness into the lives of others. At first, it was almost imperceptible, holding the door open for someone struggling with their umbrella, offering his seat on a crowded train, or simply smiling at a weary shopkeeper. Each action seemed ordinary, almost mundane, yet each carried a ripple that reached farther than he could see. One evening, Takeshi found himself in a narrow alley lined with lanterns swaying gently in the breeze. A mother struggled to quiet her crying child while juggling shopping bags and a restless stroller. Takeshi instinctively stepped forward, offering to carry the stroller up the small set of steps leading to her apartment. She looked at him with surprise, her exhaustion evident, but relief washed over her face as he gently lifted the stroller, carefully balancing it as he climbed the steps. "You don't know how much this helps," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Sometimes, I feel like the world expects too much from one person." Takeshi simply nodded, feeling a quiet satisfaction that had nothing to do with recognition or praise. As he handed the stroller back to her, he noticed a small detail. The child's tears had stopped, replaced by a curious, almost shy smile. It struck him that kindness had a contagious quality, one that spread silently from one person to another, often without anyone fully understanding why. Over the next few days, he began to hear stories, strangers sharing with him or with others about the kind stranger they had encountered. Someone had stopped to help a lost tourist find her way. Another had comforted an elderly man whose wallet had been stolen. In each story, Takeshi recognized a subtle pattern. One small act of selflessness inspired another, and the cycle continued. It was in a quiet moment, watching children play in a park that evening, that Takeshi realized something profound. The technique he had studied was not meant to control minds, as the manuscript had warned. Its true power lay in amplifying the inherent goodness in people, in awakening a latent empathy that existed in everyone. By acting from a place of pure intention, he had become a conduit for kindness, a catalyst that allowed the best in humanity to surface naturally. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the cherry blossom trees, petals drifting softly to the ground. Takeshi smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest he had never known before. The city, once overwhelming and impersonal, now felt alive with connection. The people he passed were not strangers, they were vessels of potential, each capable of acts of generosity, courage, and compassion. At that moment, Takeshi understood that the forbidden technique was not forbidden because it was dangerous. It was forbidden because it revealed a truth people often feared. That true influence comes not from power or fear, but from the courage to act with empathy and the willingness to care for others, even in small, seemingly insignificant ways. Weeks later, a sudden earthquake struck the city. The ground shook violently, sending people screaming into the streets. Windows shattered, lights flickered, and the once familiar cityscape transformed into chaos within moments. Takeshi, standing on the rooftop of his apartment building when the tremor began, felt a surge of fear, but he also felt clarity. All the lessons from the forbidden manuscript and the acts of kindness he had practiced prepared him for this moment. He rushed down the stairwell, moving past neighbors frozen in panic. A young couple clutched each other, frightened children clinging to their parents. Takeshi's heart pounded, but he remembered the essence of what he had learned. Connection, empathy, and selfless action were stronger than fear. Drawing a deep breath, he projected calmness, his presence radiating reassurance to those around him. It was as though his own centeredness had a magnetic effect, allowing people to feel steadier, braver. In the street below, Takeshi saw an elderly man trapped under a fallen beam. Others hesitated, unsure how to help. Takeshi approached, assessing the situation quickly. He instructed nearby neighbors with calm authority, guiding them to lift the beam safely. Together, they freed the man, whose trembling hands and tearful eyes reflected relief and gratitude. "Thank you," the man whispered, voice quivering. "You saved my life." As Takeshi moved through the streets, he noticed the subtle yet remarkable power of empathy in action. Children helped each other climb over debris, strangers offered water to the frightened and the injured, and people sang comforting words to those in shock. It was as if the city itself had transformed, its collective humanity awakened by the presence of one calm, determined individual who chose to act with courage and compassion. At one point, Takeshi reached a collapsed alley where a mother clutched her young daughter, trapped under rubble. Without hesitation, he instructed neighbors to form a human chain, passing debris carefully while he guided the effort. Minutes later, the girl was free, crying and holding her mother tightly. The mother's eyes met Takeshi's, silently conveying a mix of gratitude and wonder. He realized then that the technique he had studied was not magic, it was human connection made visible, a force that could inspire ordinary people to do extraordinary things. By the time the tremors subsided, the city was battered but alive, and the people had discovered something within themselves they had not known existed: courage, resilience, and the profound impact of kindness. Takeshi stood amidst the aftermath, exhausted but deeply fulfilled. He understood that the forbidden technique's true gift was awakening the humanity in everyone, transforming fear into action, and isolation into a shared sense of purpose. As night fell, the city lights flickered back on, and Takeshi walked among his neighbors, now smiling and helping one another rebuild. For the first time, he felt a complete sense of belonging, a realization that his journey had never been about controlling others, but about inspiring the best within them, revealing that the most powerful force in the world is not fear or power, but empathy and selflessness. Months passed, and the city slowly recovered from the earthquake. The streets, once chaotic and scarred, now bustled with life again, but something had changed. People smiled at one another more freely, helped each other without hesitation, and shared small acts of kindness that rippled through the community. Takeshi noticed it everywhere he went: the fruit vendor greeting customers warmly, children helping their elders cross the street, neighbors checking in on one another. The invisible threads of connection had grown stronger, and the city felt more alive than ever before. Takeshi returned to the rooftop where it all had begun. The night sky stretched endlessly above, stars glimmering faintly through the soft glow of the city lights. Sitting quietly, he reflected on the journey he had taken, from a lonely, uncertain man to someone who had discovered the profound impact of empathy. The forbidden manuscript still rested beside him, its pages worn and fragile, but he realized now that the true lesson was not in the words themselves, it was in the way he had chosen to live. He thought of the young woman with the groceries, the elderly man trapped under debris, the children who had found courage in the chaos, and the countless small acts of kindness that had multiplied like sparks in the dark. Each memory brought a warmth to his chest, a reminder that even the smallest gestures could change lives in ways no one could foresee. He understood that the power he had once sought for control was never about bending others, it was about awakening the goodness that already existed within them. As the cool night breeze brushed against his face, Takeshi felt a quiet joy, the kind that comes from knowing he had made a difference without seeking recognition. The city below hummed with life, and he realized that this was the true essence of humanity, the ability to care, to connect, and to lift one another, even when no one is watching. The technique, once shrouded in mystery and fear, had become a guide for compassion, a map for awakening hearts. Takeshi smiled, standing up and looking out over the city. The lights glimmered like countless tiny stars, each one a story, a life, a potential for kindness. He knew that his journey was far from over, but he felt a sense of peace he had never known before. The world could be harsh and unforgiving, but it was also capable of extraordinary beauty when people acted with empathy and selflessness. Finally, he whispered to himself, this is the real power, the power to touch hearts, to inspire hope, and to remind people that they are never truly alone. With that, Takeshi stepped back from the edge of the rooftop, carrying with him a quiet determination to continue spreading kindness wherever he went. The city, and the people within it, had been transformed, not by force or fear, but by one man's choice to act from the heart. And in that moment, he knew with absolute certainty that hope was not something distant or impossible. It lived in every selfless act, every gesture of love, and every connection forged between human hearts.